Chamatkar Sandhu reporting for KammakazeTV. Anthony Johnson walked into the Lion's Den here at the Tele2 Arena in Stockholm, Sweden, knocks out Alexander Gustafsson. I just spoke to my media colleagues here in Stockholm at the Tele2 Arena to find out what their thoughts were on the matchup tonight, the potential matchup between Johnson and Jones, where Gustafsson goes from here, and also to sum up their experiences this week in Stockholm, which has been the biggest event in Europe and the second biggest event in UFC history. Seb, we just witnessed Anthony Johnson knocking out Alexander Gustafsson. First of all, your reaction to that main event?
Well, I'm honest in these things. It does kind of feel like I was punched in the soul, and it hurts. But you got to give it up to Anthony Johnson. He fought the perfect fight to beat Alex. I said it beforehand. He's going to be the most dangerous first 2 rounds. He pulled it off early. And hats off to him. He deserves a title shot, absolutely.
Incredible performance. I mean, it was just amazing by Anthony Johnson. I think, we talked all week long. We knew that Anthony was going to be at his most dangerous early on. He certainly proved that. But, you and I both thought Alexander Gustafsson was going to win the fight. And what I really thought was that the movement, that Alex was showing was going to prove very problematic. And, I thought Alex fought a decent fight. I know he's kind of down on himself at the post-fight press conference, but I thought he did the right things. But Anthony's aggression and cutting off the cage, not allowing him any space, was just amazing. We all know he has the power, and of course he flashed it once again. Listen, I thought the stoppage could have been made 20 punches earlier probably. I mean, I think he was given every single opportunity to try to recover in front of his home crowd, but an amazing performance from Anthony Johnson. I know a lot of people were looking forward to a possible rematch with Alexander Gustafsson and Jon Jones. That would have been fantastic, but you know what? This is some fresh blood. It makes it something a little new. It's a fantastic comeback story with Anthony Johnson and kind of all he's done in his career. And stylistically, here's a guy that can knock out anybody with one punch. He doesn't have to outpoint Jon Jones for 25 minutes. He can lose 4 rounds, and land one punch in the 5th and get it done. So I think it does make it exciting. And, there's a new kind of respectful Anthony Johnson. So I don't think this is going to turn into any kind of a grudge match. I think he's, I think he's going to be respectful of Jon Jones. It's not going to turn into kind of a trash-talking affair. But just from a stylistic point of view, I think it's going to be a good fight.
I told you so. That's all I'm going to say. I think he did exactly what I thought he was going to do. He came straight out, put the pressure on. Gus doesn't really hold well under pressure, in my opinion. Came in, landed his shots. Gustafsson exchanged with him, but once Johnson landed a couple of heavy money shots to put him wobbling, that was it. Mark Goddard is generally a good referee, and I don't really have too much of a problem with a 5-round fight like that, but it was pretty sickening seeing the way his head was going for the last couple of shots. I thought it could have been stopped a little bit earlier, especially when we're going mad all night saying how Andy Ogle was screwed or Dan Henderson was screwed, and then that is allowed to happen in the main event. Go on. No, I'm not trying to put an exclamation mark on it. Okay. I'm just saying that why so many people were willing to count out Anthony Johnson to begin with. I know the hometown factor. I know everyone here is Swedish. I know Alexander is the 2nd biggest sports star in the country behind beside Zlatan Ibrahimovic. But no, I was coming, and now Anthony Johnson has just put himself in one of the most money opportunity positions of his career. The guy who lost to Rich Clemente before, the guy who struggled making weight at 170 is now going to fight one of the best pound-for-pound fighters in the world, and it's probably going to be the 2nd most anticipated fight of the year behind Conor McGregor versus Jose Aldo.
We'll get to Johnson in just a second,
yeah.
But where does Gustafsson go from here now?
It's hard, man. It's really hard for him personally, but I think if you look at it for a more distance, you can see that the light heavyweight division isn't that thick. It isn't a lot of big names right now, so he won't have too much. It's not that far to the title anyway, because if he wins his next fight, it will be maybe 1 fight or 2 fights from the Jon Jones or who holds the title.
Well, that's the fight I'd like to see against DC. That one, I think that's a great fight. That's one that would sell out an arena here, I'm sure. Maybe do it next door in the Globe, and probably mightn't fill out the arena. I don't think we're sold out tonight as much as you want to believe what the UFC are saying. Bruce, I think, said it was sold out, but there was a few empty seats floating around. But that's a fight I'd like to see. It makes sense as well because they're both coming off losses, and it's just it's a fight I think the fans want to see as well.
He's fine. I mean, this is obviously a tough loss for him. He's not going to get that rematch with Jones right now, but he's still right there. He's still one of the top 3-4 guys in that division. We know light heavyweight is not a very great division for the UFC. It's pretty thin, and it's not going to take him very long to get back to this position he was in going into tonight. Maybe 1 or 2 wins. People are talking about the fight with Daniel Cormier. I don't know if I like that one because people both want to see the rematches with Cormier and Jones and Gustafsson and Jones, and right now it just doesn't seem to make a ton of sense to put those guys against each other and have one of them lose 2 in a row and really kill off a contender for even a longer point in time. So there's some options they can do. I'd like to see them give Gustafsson a more winnable fight, a Jimmy Manuwa type option where he can go out there and get an impressive win and just return back to the spot he was in going into tonight.
Yeah, he can go anywhere, and I don't know if one upside from this is, he got hit in the head, and it happens. He got caught. We didn't see that he was too slow or, couldn't handle the speed or wear out over the long round. So, Alex could still get a title shot eventually. He's going to have to work, his way up. I think for his career, it might not be the best thing to jump right into a Cormier fight. I think that's a real tough matchup for him. So I think he's going to have to manage his career and just realize, he has lost 2 out of 3 fights when you look at it. So he's still at 28. He's improving. So we'll see where he goes from here, but I just think he needs to be patient with this next move.
Well, Jones versus Johnson is going down later on this year for the UFC Light Heavyweight Championship. I know it's, we're still months and months away from that, but just give us your thoughts on that particular matchup.
I like it. I mean, listen, I think Jon Jones is the best pound-for-pound fighter in the world right now. Certainly he's going through his personal struggles, but I think he'll get past all that. But I think he's the #1 guy in the world. So, right now I can tell you I'm going to be picking Jon Jones, okay? I'll go on record now. I mean, he's the best pound-for-pound fighter in the world. But again, Anthony Johnson's showing that he only has to connect once. That, the first punch really hurt Alex. And from there on, it was just finishing up what he saw. And he's so ruthless and relentless with his aggression and with his power and just sees it. He saw the opportunity and was not going to let it slip by. So, listen, I think that makes it an exciting fight because, again, everything can change in one moment. Anthony Johnson does not have to beat Jon Jones for 3 of 5 rounds. He just has to beat him for 10 seconds, and I think that's exciting. But listen, I think Jon Jones is the best, but I think it's going to be a fun stylistic matchup.
Yeah, a bit more unpredictable than I thought because I think Jones could have done what Alex could have done tonight and just box his way around, use his reach. So, Johnson's a live dog, and if the odds are stretched out there, it'd probably be worth a good play to get your money in. But if I had to pick one or the other, I'd pick Jones all the way.
Judging by the shape that Johnson's been in, I think this is a super close fight. I'm thinking that my prediction is going to be similar as to what it was for this fight. First 2 rounds, Johnson could very, very well take the win. And it's still a bit too early to say, and I think we're all completely brain fried considering how early it is. But I'm saying it's like a 50-50 fight right now.
Yeah, premature thoughts. Jon Jones needs to watch out for the knockout power, and I don't think he's going to want to poke Anthony Johnson in the eye. Tonight we saw after he got hit with that eye poke, it was just a different monster took over Anthony Johnson. So if that happens in that fight, we know Jones is being criticized for his eye pokes. That'll be an interesting story, but just a straight-up fight. It's hard to pick against Jones at this point, considering what he's done in the UFC. I like him right now because I just think he's a little more diverse, but God, how can you count Anthony Johnson out of any fight at this point? If that dude lands on you once, you're in serious, serious trouble.
Okay, well, finally to wrap up, and they're clearing the wires behind us, and probably going to kick us out any second now. But you've been here, I believe, for every UFC event in Stockholm, correct?
I have.
Biggest event in Europe, second biggest event in UFC history. Just sum up your experience in Stockholm this week.
Incredible. I talked to you earlier this week and said I don't know if the buzz is around this event like I thought it was. I felt like we were having Conor McGregor hangover. It's just been so much about Conor for the previous week, and I didn't feel it. But, man, tonight you felt it. You walked in. This building is beautiful, and the UFC did an amazing job setting up the way it looked, the huge overhead screen, the atmosphere. It's awesome. The Rogers Center in Toronto, 55,000, that was incredible. But that building is it's so big that it doesn't really have like an intimate feel. It feels like there's people that look like they were sitting a mile away while we were down on press row. Here, it seemed to me like people still had a good view. Everything looked real nice. It's had a great feel. I think, I'm not going to pretend to be an expert on venues and arenas and stuff, but if there's more venues like this in Europe or around the world that are this size, I think this is fantastic size. I think it's perfect. So I thought the atmosphere was great. Obviously, the wind got sucked out of the building real quick in the main event, but the Swedish fans represented. And, for Dave to say that they were selling tickets all the way through the main event, they announced 26,000 on the broadcast, and they say 30,000. They were buying tickets all the way up to the main event. It was 4 a.m. local. That's incredible. 30,000 people is amazing. He said 44 countries were represented and where tickets were sold. I think those are all good indicators for the health of the market. I just think, obviously, you want some Swedish fighters to get some wins before they come back here. So a lot of other great destinations we found out about this week. So I think there's plenty of spaces in Europe. I think Sweden, I heard a lot of the Swedish media. It sounded like they were pretty down, like, oh, we're never going to get the UFC again. It's never going to happen. I don't think that's the case. Maybe it'll be a little bit longer. Maybe it won't be, 4 or 5 months. Maybe it'll be a year, 18 months. But I think it's still a healthy market. And I think this was an incredible event. This is one that I'll definitely remember.
As a whole city, as a place for the UFC, in my opinion, now their hotbed and their hub in Europe. Definitely looking forward to it. The question was raised by Subhan. You just talked at the press conference, like, are they going to come back to Sweden? Is Alexander so influential that they need to come back to Sweden with him? I don't know. That's up in the air. You saw back in October they only did 9,500 without Gustafsson. Tonight they did almost 30,000. So it's kind of swings and roundabouts. Are the Swedish MMA fans stoked enough to attend an event at 4 o'clock in the morning if Alexander Gustafsson is in the main event? That remains to be seen. But there's a lot of top guys in the US and Europe that we could put in that position. I wouldn't mind seeing Dan Henderson versus Michael Bisping again. And if that's a big card that the Americans are interested in, then Dave Allen's keen on it. I'm not too keen on it, but it makes our morning flights a lot easier when we don't go to bed until 7 o'clock in the morning.